In this video, I will be going over how to simplify fractions, how to convert fractions to decimals, and how to convert decimals to fractions. Let's start by simplifying fractions. In order to simplify a fraction, you want to think of the greatest common factor that goes into both the numerator and the denominator evenly. In other words, you want to think, what can I divide both the numerator and the denominator by evenly? What's the biggest number? In this case, the biggest number I can divide these numbers by is 12. And then I do, 24 divided by 12 is 2. And 36 divided by 12 is 3. Now, sometimes I don't come up with the greatest common factor right away, which is fine. For example, 42 over 56, let's say I don't know the greatest common factor. But I do know one common factor is 7. So I can divide both these by 7, and I would get 6/8. But looking at this answer, I know that's not a simplified fraction because I can still divide the numerator and denominator by 2. So completely simplified, this is 3/4. It's okay to divide multiple times until you get to the simplest form. But just know that since I divided by 7 and I divided by 2, the greatest common factor here that I should have chose the first time was 14. 7 times 2. All right, converting fractions into decimals is really easy if the denominator is 10 or 100 or 1,000. So sometimes I scale up the fractions in order to achieve that. In the first example, it's 3/100ths. So that means you put a 3 in the hundredths place, and you put a 0 in the tenths place. In this example, I really wish that it was over 100. And one way of achieving this is to multiply 25 to get 100. So 25 times 4 gives me 100, which means I'd have to multiply the numerator by the same thing. And I would get 16 over 100, which means I have to have a 16 ending in the hundredths place, which means I'd have 0.16. Okay, 3/5. Man, I really wish that this was over 10. So to get this over 10, I'm going to do 5 times 2, which means I have to multiply the 3 times 2 as well. And I get 6 over 10, which means I'm going to put a 6 in the tenths place. So the answer is 0.6. 7 over 50, man, I really wish this was 100. So I have to multiply it by 2 to get 100. So I'm going to multiply this by 2 to get 100. And I get 14 over 100, which means that the answer has to have a 14 ending in the hundredths place, so my answer is 0.14. To convert decimals into fractions, think about where that decimal ends, think about place values, and go accordingly. So for example, this fraction ends in the hundredths place. So I'm going to write 14 over 100. This fraction ends in the thousands place, so I'm going to write 3 over 1,000. This ends in the hundredths place, so I'm going to write 2 and 4 hundredths. And this ends in the tenths place, so I'm going to write 4 and 6 tenths. Now wait, we want to make sure all these are in simplest form, and spoiler alert, they're not. So I know I can divide the numerator and denominator here by 2, so I get 7 over 50. That's my final answer. This is already in simplest form. I know I can divide 4 and 100 by 4. So my answer is 2 and 1/25. And I know I can divide 6 and 10 by 2. So this is 4 and 3/5. All right, I hope that was helpful. Please ask me if you have any questions.